Hi, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and thank you for joining me today. We have a HTML email video where we're going to be creating a HTML email with a full table and graph inside the email along with specific text before the picture and specific text after the picture that can be customized. We're going to wrap that up in a complete payroll application that you can run on any computer for any type of company. So it's going to be a great training. Let's get started. All right, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. I've had a lot of requests on how to add tables, how to add graphs, and how to add pictures within a specific email, not as an attachment, but actually embedded within the email itself, exactly as it is displayed within the table. And so there's a few challenges that we've run across with this, and we're going to address those challenges and how to solve them. There's also some great resources on the web, and we'll go ahead and go over how we go about addressing those and how we go about taking care of those challenges. For example, Ron DeBruin has a great site, probably one of the best, where he goes over how to create, in this example, a male range selection in a body of the email, which is what we're going to be doing. However, in his particular solution, he uses a defined range, a function here. And the functions, and I don't like to use functions too much because of the 64-bit and 32-bit issues that can come across on several machines. Also, it's a little bit confusing because the macro usually includes something like this, which is the function, and then it refers to a function, so it kind of bounces around back and forth. I prefer to have everything in one simple macro that you can follow along. As well, his solution doesn't address the graph, and in this particular table I've placed a graph, and generally when we do a range to HTML, graphs are only the actual ranges and the data are addressed in the email, and I want everything in the email exactly as it is displayed, and I want to show that up. And also I want a variable range. That means I want to show all the payroll details. In this one, we're going to be selecting an employee, and we're going to be displaying the payroll items from that date. And I want, if we have a longer date, I want all the payroll items to show. But if we have a shorter period, if it's only a few items, I want only those few items in that graph. So I want it to make sure that the range is variable. So we can do that through what's called a picture. We can insert a picture directly into that email, and that picture can demonstrate exactly identically as how we have our range, and that's something that I want. And I also want to send specific information in that email. I want a variable dynamic email subject that includes information about the payroll, such as employee name, the period start date, and the period from, period from and period to. And I also want some text before the picture, and I want some text after the picture. Also, traditionally, we have had issues where the text information in Excel doesn't carry over exactly into the email. For example, when we have two lines here, often when we send an email, it's going to look like this. So that means the character or the return carriage doesn't always carry over. So I'm going to show you how to address that. For example, we have 4 different lines here, and often when we have a text to HTML, it doesn't carry over. So I'm going to show you how to get around those challenges and how to make sure that the text you enter here in Excel is exactly like it appears when we create that email. So we've got lots of challenges, and I'm going to address each and every one of those challenges, and these are challenges that you might be having in your emails. So I wanted to make sure that we show you how to get around those challenges so that you can create emails and have those pictures in the emails exactly as they are displayed within the emails. So let's go ahead and get started on this, and we'll go over just the basic framework of how we created this application. This particular application allows us to generate payroll reports, and those payroll reports are dynamic based on the period dates that we have selected, and then we have information about hours and we have deductions. You can change those as you see fit. We also include a list of employees, so just a basic list of employees with ID numbers. We have our overtime, our regular rate and our overtime rate based on per employee, as well as some information on the employee and the email address, which is important as well. The other items are not so important. We have time clock data, and this is traditionally what you might have data if you have a time clock program that you're importing from, if you're manually, or if perhaps you've created an Excel time clock. Maybe one day we'll do that in the future. If you want me to show you how to create an Excel time clock application that generates this, maybe we'll do that. So go ahead and put your comments or your requests down below this video, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or any other, or on the blog, and I'll go ahead and try to accommodate those requests and see if we can't get you whatever you like there. So we include some time clock data. We just have basically employee ID, clock in and clock out. Now have a look at this. There's a reason we did not include employee names in the time clock data. The reason is employee names can change. You might enter an employee name and then you may want to change it at a later time. So what we want is we always want to use this unique employee ID along with your time clock data. So it's the ID that gets carried over and not the employee name. Now you could also add an employee name in the time clock, and that might be helpful when you know that. But for our purposes, we really care about the employee ID because that is unique and that will not change per employee, but employee names can change. So that means when we change employees, all the data changes based on this, and I'm going to show you how we did that as well. So moving along, so we have the components. We have a time clock data, and we're going to be showing you how we gather time clock data for just one specific employee by using an advanced filter. Our advanced filter will include an employee ID, a clock in date or greater than, and a less than clock out date. So that means when we change a date here, it will go ahead and make that update to our advanced filter, and it'll filter out those. So that's really, really important. I know we have been over advanced filters in the past. We will continue to go over advanced filters in the future. They are just that powerful and just that important. So it's really, really such a critical thing, and it's something that I use almost in every application. So if you don't quite understand advanced filters, follow this video. We're going to go over it once again because I want you to understand how powerful they are. So we have this video here, and also we have variables, employee name, period from, and period to. So that's going to help us creating our email. We have a graph here, and it's basically details our net earnings and then our deductions, so that we have that, and I want to show you plus our net earnings. And this is all dynamic based on the information displayed in this table. Let's go ahead and take this apart and see just how we did that. As with our other videos, we're going to be using columns A and columns B for our hidden information. And keep in mind that when you hide them specifically, our graph will disappear. Okay, so you may want to just open them up just a little bit, or have them at one point or something, or hide them just slightly, because so that's a reason for that. If you don't see your graph, it's probably because it's hidden. I recommend that you take this graph data here, the earning. This is what our graph is based on, and maybe place them on some other sheet or something farther away. Maybe place them way down here. If you don't want the data to display, you can put it all the way over here and then not hide it. So that's another option. But for our purposes, I wanted to just show everything that we're using in one specific column or two columns. So that is why we have that here. So keep that in mind. When we select an employee, when we change employees, that employee ID is here and the employee database row is here. So we've created some named ranges here. Let's go over the named ranges. I believe it's just 2 into the formulas, and into the name manager we have criteria. These are automatically generated. The extracts are automatically generated by our advanced filter. So the ones we're going to focus on is employee ID, and I've used a dynamic range This is offset, right? Offset and creates a dynamic range, and that means that as we add employee IDs, the range changes. So I like to use offset so that it keeps in mind. So offset, we're going to use the count A. Count A will count all of the numbers in this range all the way from A3 to A954, or you can use pretty much any range you want here. It's really, so it's going to count those, and then it's going to go from A3 to whatever the count is. So as you add items, it'll increase. So if we close this and we add one more item here, that name is going to change. So when you click on employee ID, let's go ahead and go into the formulas, name manager, and click on employee ID, and then tab over, you'll see that the dancing ants go around now include this number 7. So that is a dynamic name range, and they're really, really powerful. We've done the same thing for employee name here. So when we select that and then tab over, we see the dancing ants around the employee name, and that is dynamic as well. So as our employees increase, we will see that named range increase as well. So we have employee name and employee ID. We're going to focus on those two right now. Let's go ahead and remove that 7 since that's not actually an employee. Back into the payroll reports, we have created an index match formula that's going to help us locate our employee ID, and it's going to be based on this employee name that we have selected. So what it's doing here is we're going to use index. What are we indexing? We're indexing the employee ID because that's what we want to find. We want to find the employee ID. What named range or what named range? Now we have to find the row. We need the row. How do we find the row? Well, we use match. We're going to match E3, which is the employee name. We're going to find it within this named range, employee name. And then we want an exact match. So this is going to be 0. Index match is one of the most powerful. You won't see me use VLOOKUP. I'm not a big fan of VLOOKUP. I do love index match. Many of you like VLOOKUP and have success with that, so that's great. But my personal preference is index match, and here we have that, and we have wrapped that in an if error statement because we don't want, should there not be anything found, I don't want an error message. I just want a blank, and this way we can test in our VBA code. We're going to say if this is blanked, then there's an issue, so we can always test for that in VBA. So I've wrapped this in an if error. The employee database row, we need to know what row. I need to know what row this employee is on, and you know our employees start at row 3. So whenever we find something, we need to make sure we add 2 because our rows are starting at 3. We've done just that along with a match. So we've matched B3. We know we're looking for the employee ID and we want to know what row that's on. We're going to use a match. And then we're going to add 2 so that we know that employee number 4 is on row 6. Employee number 4 here is on row 6. So because it's important, I need to know that employee row number because I need to know I need to put in what their regular rate is, and I need to know what their overtime rate is. I need to put those in, and to do that within VBA, I need to know what row. We could use VBA to locate the row as well. There are many choices. In this case, we're going to use a formula to locate that row. So we've done just that. And so we need to pull in these 2 rates so that we can calculate. So we're going to do that in VBA. Also, we can set an overtime threshold. This helps us calculate our overtime. And overtime is located here. And so basically in this particular formula, when we're calculating overtime hours, we are going to say if the total hours, in other words, if the end date time minus the start date is greater than our threshold, right? So listen, so here we have a little bit of total hours. We have overtime hours of 0.08, but if we change this threshold to 9 hours, you'll see our overtime hours go to 0 because our threshold is larger, and now our regular overtime includes regular. But if we were to change that to 7, right, you'll see now we have total regular hours 8 and our overtime hours is now 1 hour. So simply changing this overtime threshold allows us to calculate our overtime automatically. So it's really, really powerful and helpful. If you're running some type of a payroll program or employee or HR type of application, you can use this. So it's not just an HTML email. I want to create more. I want to give you lots and lots of value, not just one template to use HTML emails. I want to give you the full complete application that you can use, and not just that. So I've gone ahead and done that for you in this case. So we have our employee threshold, and we've given that a named range here. I want to name that range so that I can use this name inside the formulas. Now also, you'll notice that this line doesn't have a formula and this line doesn't have a formula, but there are times when we need formulas here, right? We're going to call this on-demand calculations. And in this particular tiny workbook, it doesn't make too much of a difference. But the idea is, in large workbooks, we don't want formulas where we don't need them. We only want formulas where we need them. So we're going to tell VBA in our VBA code, which we'll go over very soon, only put the formula where we need it. If there's no data in this row, we don't need it. But for example, if we change this to the 8th, we need that. We need formulas. Again, now we need them here. So VBA is going to say put formulas only where we need them. Because when we calculate, when we run that calculation, every formula in the workbook is calculated. When we go to formulas and we calculate now, every single formula in the workbook is calculated, or sometimes just on the specific sheet. So we want to limit the number of formulas unless we really need them. So when we use on-demand calculation, that means, hey, only calculate the cells that I want. Only put formulas in the cells that, normally we would just drag and drop, all the way down here and put formulas all the way. But I want to show you a better way. Now in this particular, this is a small application. It's not going to make any difference. But when you create applications in Excel with hundreds of thousands of rows, it does make a big difference. So I want to teach you techniques that will allow you to create faster, lighter, and smaller workbooks that run quicker. So it's a great technique, and I'll show you how that was done. And basically the idea is, and I'll show you, is I have a formula here. Let's go ahead and change this to red. I have 3 formulas here. And all I'm doing in VBA is I'm going to copy this formula. These are the same formulas here and here and here. They're just different rows. So basically what we're going to be doing in VBA is we're going to copy these formulas, and then we're going to paste the formulas just like here. Paste special and paste formulas. That is what we're doing inside VBA, and we're only using the rows that contain data. So if I know my last row is 19, I'm going to copy this in VBA, and I'm going to paste it only in these rows. Right? Paste formula right here. That's what I'm doing, but we're doing it in VBA. And then we've hidden this. I've changed the font to blue, the same as the background, and that enables us to hide it. There's other ways to hide it. We could easily just use an if error or something, or if there's other ways to hide it. We could use a blank, like we could do a test. If there's no value here, then go ahead. So there's many ways to hide it. I've just chosen to use, I want to show you the technique we use to hide zeros, which is in this. So there's many ways to do that. And that is a great way to do that. Next up, we have our earnings summary, and I just put it all together here. We have it here, but I put it all together here so that it fits in this nice graph here, this nice donut graph here. So I've basically copied the links and I've summarized it here. So it's basically all of the data here along with the net earnings, along with your net earnings here. So we've done that here. And I've done, in this particular, I've used one cell to do everything. So I use a text. I've combined text here with a formula here, with the formula and a format. So we've got 3 things going on here. We've got text. We've got our formula, which is E9 minus H, which is basically the total income minus the total deductions. And then we've set a format. You can change the format however you like. So we've got 3 components of this formula, which is really great and powerful. It allows us to create a very nice, nicely formatted total here, which is really going to be helpful for looking at things so we can see the total. We can place our total. So we've used that, and we have a little summary here. And that helps us combine it. And this part of the summary is also contained in this graph here. Next up, we probably don't need these. I think we will take those out if in your workbook, because I think we've placed them up here and that should be sufficient. All right, let's go ahead and get into the VBA so we can show you how this was done. Okay, into the Developers tab we go. You can find the Developers tab here and Visual Basic. If you don't have the Developers tab available, you can find it into Options, going into the Customize ribbon, and you can make sure the Developers tab is selected here. Alt F11 will also get you there. And into the VBA, we have some on-sheet macros here. And there's just a few of them. We do have automated tab here, which we're going to use, and in this particular application we're not going to go through that too much, but essentially it allows us to automate the tab order from one to the other, and there's just 3 fields. I did cover that in Auto Tab Load and Save on YouTube, so you can find that there, or on Facebook, so we do have that available for you where we go through that particular in detail. And that just basically uses this macro and allows us to set the order, set the cells, and then set the order of where we're tabbing to. Otherwise, on sheet, we're going to, if the user has selected more than one cells, we're just going to exit this. If the user has selected either E3, which is the employee name, H3, which is the from date, or K3, which is the to date field. So if the user has made a change in any one of those fields, then we need to run a test, and if it passes the test, then go ahead and load the time clock data. And that test is basically this: not any one of those 3 cells cannot be blank. So we're going to test. Make sure E3 is not blank. Make sure that K3 is not blank. And make sure that H3 is not blank. This should be H3. Let's just change it. Okay. So E3 is not blank, H3 is not empty, and K3 is not empty. So those 3 must go, and B4 cannot be empty. And if you remember, B4 is the employee ID. Let's go back into that so I can show you that here. B3 is the employee ID. You want to make sure that that B3, that means an actual particular employee. So if this is blank, that means they have not selected employee. We want to make sure the employee is actually an employee that they have selected. We have data validation that should protect against that, but there's just one extra protection there. So as long as those 4 conditions are okay, then we just run this macro, load time clock data. Also, the other on-sheet macro, when the user makes a selection change, either in the from date field, let's go ahead and lower that a little bit, we can see that, and then raise that. Okay, now we can see H3 is the from date, and K3 is the to date. So we're saying if the user selects either K3 or H3, then show the calendar form. If they select this, show the calendar form. If they select this, show the calendar form. So that's how that works. Let's go ahead and reduce these a little bit so we can see the full schedule. Okay, back into VBA. So that's it for the on-sheet macros. That is on the payroll records there. There's not too much going on there. This tells us if the user leaves the worksheet deactivate, then cancel the tab, automated tab. That means, and I'll show you what that. So when we leave that sheet, we want to make sure we can tab to anyone we want, right? Because there's no tabs on this one. But if they activate that sheet and they click tab, then so we need to activate the tab macro when they arrive at the sheet, activate the sheet, and deactivate it. So that's what that does. So that just runs those 2 macros there. All right, that is it for there's not too much going on the sheet itself, just those. Let's go into the time clock data. And really today we're going to be focused on just 2 macros. One is loading the time clock information, and the other is the create emails macros. We have 2 macros on the create emails, one that sends all of the emails and one that sends just one. So we'll go over that second. First, let's go into the load the time clock data. Now, once again, let me just go ahead and show you on the Excel application directly what's going on, and then we'll go through the code as well. So back into the Excel application, Basically, what we're doing is when a user makes a change to any one of these fields, we need to load the data. So if we change the date here, load the data. If we change the employee, load the data. If we change the to date, reload the data. So the idea is we need to clear out all of this data, clear it out through VBA, and then reload it based on new conditions. And to do that, no, that date's not going to work. Okay, let's go find a date. We can change it to the 5th. Okay. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to take all of this data in the time clock data. We need to put the employee ID here. We need to put the new clock in date here and the new clock out date here. That means greater than this or less than this. And then we need to run an advanced filter. Then we need to take the clock in date, we need to take this information, just this information, clock in, clock out, break hours, and bring it here, clock in, clock out, copy here. Then we need to determine the last row. Then we need to copy these 3 formulas and paste them right here. Oh, and of course the notes. We need to bring the notes also from here. We need to bring the notes also from there into there. So that is actually what we're going to be doing in this macro. Let's go over the macro. Now that you understand what we're going to be doing, let's go ahead and go into this macro. First of all, we want to define the employee row, the last results row as long. These are going to be whole numbers that we're going to be using in dynamic references throughout our code. We also need to know what the employee row is. The employee row, remember, that's in B4. We did go over that already. B4 is our employee row here. So we've covered that. And now what we want to do is on sheet 1, remember all of this is on sheet 1 so far, we need to clear any existing data. E6 and E8, those are the hours worked, the total, the rate, E6 and E8. Those are the rates. We bring those rates in from here and here. We need to clear those out. We may be changing employees, so we need to clear those out so we can put new rates in. So E6 and E8 is part of what we're clearing out. We also need to clear out the entire table. So we need D13 to K99. We need to clear that out as well. Let's go up. And need to clear out this entire table. So we must do that within VBA. We can do that with just that one line of clear contents code right here. So next up, we need to put in, remember we pulled out the regular rate, so now we're going to find, we have the employee row here. We know what the employee row is. So when we know the employee row, we can easily put in the regular rate and the overtime rate in E6 and E8, because we know that in the employee sheet, sheet 2 is the employees. C column is the regular rate, D column is the overtime rate. So when we go, we know C column is the regular rate, D column is the override rate. We know the row, we know the column, so it's easy to take this and put it right in here. So that's all we're doing in that VBA code right there. So we're going to putting those 2 values in. Next up, we want to run this advanced filter. We just went over that. The first thing we want to do is we want to clear any information from previous advanced filters. Since we're running a brand new filter, we want to make sure we clear this out. So within the VBA itself, we're going to go on the time clock log. We're going to clear out line 2, line 3. We need to clear all this out like that, and we need to make sure we clear out all of the data here like that. We want to make sure the results are clear and the filters are also clear. So that is what that line of code is going to do. It's going to clear out A3 through E3 and A5 through 8. So it's going to clear all of those previous filters, and that's sheet 3. Sheet 3 is our time clock log. Next up, we need to put in the employee ID. We need to put in the employee ID. We need to put in the pay period from date. We know the date, but we need to make sure we add in greater than or equal. That's going to help us determine, because we need to know greater than or equal. And we also need to put in the to date. The to date also has to be less than or equal to. So we're going to take the K3, that's where our to date is located. We're going to add this in. So that's going to give it us the effect that's going to help us narrow down and limit and filter out the data to just the range, the date range we want. Then we have to determine the last row. If we're going to run our advanced filter, I need to know what the last row of data is. If we're going to run this advanced filter, I need to make sure we include all the data. So I need to find out, what is the last row? What is this last row? It's 98 right now. I need to find that 98, and we can use that through our dynamic variable. Last row equals sheet 3 A99. This is going to get us our last row, determine the last row of the time clock data. Okay, now we've got everything ready. We're ready to run our advanced filter. We can run our advanced filter with just one line of code. Important thing with advanced filter is, as we've been over before and we'll go over again, these headers must match these headers and these headers. Good way to simply do that when you're setting it up: copy this, click here, control, click here, paste special, paste those values. We've got to make sure those headers must match. Even if just a slight change, it will throw up an error. So we want to make sure that it is exactly like those headers must match, and we must include these headers. We must start out with this and go to the last row. So we're going to start with A2. That is in our advanced filter. So back into the VBA we go, A2 all the way to E and the last row. We're going to run an advanced filter. We're going to copy this data. We're copying. We don't want to filter it within the current range. We want to copy it to another range. And first we have to determine the criteria. That means that includes whatever filters we want. That A2 to AE3. That means our criteria is going to be right here. AA2 to AE3. This is our criteria. So everything in here is going to be used to help determine what our filter is right there. Let's go ahead and run it so that we do have some data in here, just simply entering it. Now we have our data. So now you can see employee number 2, clock in, clock out. We have our filters. So we need AA2 to AE3. Next up, we need to determine where we want those results to appear, including the headers once again. AA4 to AE4. That is our results. That is where we're going to end up. So in our advanced filter, we have copy to range. Whoops, let me get that back. Copy to range, and we'll bring it down so it's a full screen here. All right. Copy to range right here. AA4 to AE4, the same headers that we have before, and we want to make sure that it's unique. So there's 4 components of an advanced filter. We have our range here, our filter range. We have our what we're going to be copying. Copy, that's 2. We have our criteria, and we have our copy to range. So those components are important as far as an advanced filter, and that's all we need to do. Now we've got our advanced filter. Now I need to know, okay, once we have our advanced filter, I need to find out, okay, I know the first row is going to be 5 no matter what, but what is the last row? If I need to copy this data over into here, I need to find out what the last row is. In this case, the last row is 13. So we need to find out what the last row is. So we have that last filter row so that we can copy over the data properly. So we use this line of code. In this case, we're not going to use the same variable. We're going to use something different. We're going to use last results row equals AA, and then we can just use a large number here, and up row. This will help us tell us the last row. Now we need to run a check. But what if the last results row is less than 5? That means there's no results. So we need to check in case there's no data. In case there's no data, let me run something that there's no data, just so you can see what that would entail. For example, if I change this to 6:20, right, there's going to be no data here. Time clock log, from clock in at 6:20, clock out, obviously there's no data. But I don't want that to be an error, right? I don't want to copy data over when there's no data here. So we need to do a check for that. And in this case, we're going to use VBA to run that check. And we'll do that right from here. So we're going to say if the last results row is less than 5, then go to no data. No data will skip all of this. It'll skip that and go right here. We don't need any of this if there is no data. So next up we have, so assuming there is data, what we're going to do is we're going to take the value. This is like copy and paste but much faster. And we're going to say the last results row plus 8. Now why are we adding 8? And I'll show you that. Let's go ahead and put some data back into our advanced filter so that we can see how that would work. Into pay period, let's go ahead and give us a normal pay period. Let's say the first. Okay, so now that we have data, so our first data row is 13, right? So we want to copy all the data bar. We're starting on row 13. Let's get this a little bit back to where it should be. So we need that to show properly here. So that means, but our first row of data here is 5. Our first row is row 5. Our first row of data is row 13. So what do we need to do? We need to add 8. That's why we're adding 8. Because our last row, if our last row of data is 17, right, then our last row of data here is going to be whatever it is plus 8. So plus 8. We know our first row is 13. So we just add 8, and that helps us. So we can do a straight, every time we run the advanced filter, it's going to end up on this. So that's why it's appearing there, because we keep running the code. So we're starting at row 13 on D and F to bring in the information. Value plus A value equals sheet 3. Our advanced filter results start on row 5, go to AD in the last row. AB to AD equals D through F. Let's just go ahead and go back in and show you that again. D through F, D13 through F in the last row, right, plus 8 equals AA5 through AD17. Okay, so that's it, equals. So all we're doing is we're saying this range right here equals this range right here. That's all we're doing. So we can do that with just one line of code, and that's what we've done right here. Next up, we just need to copy the notes, and the notes is the same thing. Again, we're adding 8 and we're going through. Again, with the notes, we're going right in and we're saying this range right here, J13 through J25, and remember this is actually a merged cell, but we're just going to use the beginning. We're just going to use the first merged cell, J13 through J25. Now remember, if we're clearing the contents of these merged cells, we need to make sure to include K. We must include K when we're clearing. But if we're adding data, all we need to use is that first column. J13 through the last row plus 8 equals AE5 through AE17. So it's a straight one line of code. This is much faster than copy and paste. Copy and paste would work, paste values, but it includes, multiple. This is much easier. So we've copied the notes over. Next up, we are going to use a copy and paste because we're using formulas. Remember those formulas that I showed you, those 3 formulas on that top line that were hidden? We're going to copy those, and we're going to paste those formulas into G13 plus the last row, and then we're going to cancel that copy. So these 3 lines of code, copy G11 through I11, paste them G13 through the last results row plus 8, paste the formulas. Again, let's go back in and show you what we're doing with that. Into the payroll, we're going to copy these 3 formulas here, G11 through I, copy, right? Paste special, right click, paste formulas, just like that. That's all we're doing there. So it's very, very, very simple. And also I've wrapped these in a round, these formulas in a round, and just 2 decimals so that we only have 2 decimal places maximum. That's why I've done that. So next up we have, let's go ahead and go back into the VBA. So now we've shown you how, and now that's it. Our macro is done. All we're going to do is just select, so we select another cell just to get out of the highlighted. If this wasn't, let's go ahead and comment that out to show you what we would have, and just more of a personal preference. When we run that, we would end up selecting. I just don't want all these highlighted like that, so I've gone ahead and selected E3 and I've just written that in the code so this cell gets selected. There's a few ways to do that, but I've chosen that way just so you know what is the purpose of the select and why we have it there. That is it for time clock data. That is all that is necessary. It's super powerful. I get a lot of questions concerning how do we filter and how do we bring data in. And this is super powerful because I want to get everyone in the habit of separating their front end and their back end. This is the front end of data. This is your back end. Let's cancel that out. This is your back end data here and here. So when we separate that, it's so powerful because you can do so much with it. And if you saw my last video on shared workbooks, it allows us to use a multi-user environment without shared workbooks by separating your data. So especially a program like time clock data, in which many people will be using it. And if you have not seen that, go to the previous YouTube video and look for shared workbook. That was a really powerful video where we show you how to use multiple users at the same time without using the shared workbook feature, which has lots of problems. So go ahead and take a look at that. And in that one, we have also separated the data and having a front end and a back end. So it's really, really, really powerful. And this is very, very close to how traditional software works. And Excel is super powerful when applied this way. So I wanted to get you that up. All right, let's go over the emails. Next up, we're going to show you how to do this, the send picture by payroll. And this is going to create an email based on the email of your employee. We're going to have a dynamic subject line where we have the employee line, where we have the from and to dates also dynamic, and we have the same dynamic information here, as well as some text before the picture. We have our picture and this is actually a picture, and we have some text after it formatted properly. And this is all based on an HTML body, which is really, really critical. We haven't gone over HTML body, and this is one of the main things about that. So I wanted to get you into that. Let's go ahead and go over that macro right now. Back into the VBA. Oh, and just remember, we have our email template here. We have our subject name where we can have variables. And in this case, we've included employee name. So within the email, this gets replaced with the actual employee name. This gets replaced with the actual period from, and this gets replaced with the actual period to. And the same thing in the text before the picture, and the same thing with the text after the picture. So let's go ahead and go into the macro on that so we can see how that runs. And that's the create emails macro right here. It's called send payroll email. And as with any Outlook we have done, we're going to use late binding where we dim the Outlook application and the Outlook mail as objects. This helps us for our reference libraries, so we don't need to select reference libraries. This is called late binding. We've dimensioned employee name, subject message all as strings, from date and to date. Those are dates. That's going to help us so we don't have to format the dates within the email. They're already formatted. You can format them differently if you like as well. You could simply, if you wanted to format your dates differently, you could do something like format. Just use the format, and then you can, if you wanted, this will generally go mm/dd/yy, then you can format them differently, doing something like that. So that would help as well if you want to format the dates differently than the output that you're currently having in the emails. So we've done that. We've dimensioned a picture as a range, so we need to know the range of where we're going to be copying. And then we want to know we need to know the last row of the data and the picture width and height as well, because I want to make sure that the width and height of our range is exactly like it. Without those, it'll be a little bit distorted. So we want to make sure that we do that as well. And then in order to get that, we need to create a chart, a chart, and then paste that picture into the chart, send it over to the email, and then delete the chart, because that is how you can use pictures and export those pictures using a chart as a background. We also want to know the last row. With the sheet 1, we need to know the last row. Since this is going to be a dynamic picture, I only want to know the last row of data. D, the last row. This is going to tell us our last row, so that's really important. So we need to know, because I only want to copy. We're going to start out at this D2. I think we're going to start out at C2, so that we can capture these body. And we're going to go to L and we're going to go all the way to the last row, L in the last row. So we're going to create, that's what I want copied into the email. When we copy that email, I want all of those. A little bit to the left, right? A little bit to the right, and only to the last row here. That is what I want copied over. So we need to create that range, and we're going to do that in the VBA. And so we have that last row. We're going to set the picture range. This is what I showed you. C2 is the first, L in the last row. That's how all we've done is create that. We're going to set that picture range. We need to know the employee. We need to put the employee name in the email, so we need to define that, and that is an E3. Same thing with the from and to date. These have already been formatted because they're set as dates, so therefore we don't have to set the formats here. H3 is the from date, K3 is the to date, so we've defined that information in which we will add into our email. We also need the email address. Just like we've been over, we know the employee row is in B4. So if we know the employee row is in B4 and we know in the employee sheet that our email is located in column G, we can then determine the correct email. Also, the subject here is going to be 07. We need to know what the 07 is. You know what, that A1 is not right. That's from something old. Our subject is in 07. Our text before is in 08. And our text after is in 011. So we need to define those as well. Let's get rid of this. That's something that doesn't belong here. And because our attachment is going to be defined a little bit later on. Our message before is in 08. Our message after is in 011. So we have all these components of our email in column O, just as we have done. Now what we need to do is we need to replace our variables. In other words, instead of employee name, I really need to show the actual employee name. Instead of the period, I need to show the actual from and to periods. So we use the replace that. And so let's go ahead and do that. We have four replaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 different replaces. In fact, I'm going to take one out and show you why. Okay, I'm going to take the first one out and then I'm going to put it back in. But I'm going to show you what it looks like without it first. And it's this right here. I'll copy and paste it so I don't have to retype that. Okay. So I've taken this one out. Now let's go ahead and create an email without that and show you what happens. So what I've done is I've taken something out from the text before. Let's go ahead and create that. Now look at this. Hello Lisa, the following, you see this? It's all on the same line. I don't want that on the same line. I want it here, right? I want it there. I want it just like I have done here. You see that? Just like I've done here. I've used Alt-Enter to get to use that next line, and I want it to look just like that. That's why I use one more replace within the code, and that's very, very important. So we're going to replace one more thing, just as I have before, and I'm going to copy and paste that back in here, right here, right there. Oh, it's basically this here. My clipboard got cleared out. Okay, so what is we doing? What are we replacing? Character 10, that is the enter. That means it's looking for enter or return or carriage return. It's going to look for this character. This is a hidden character in Excel. And it's going to replace it with BR. This is the HTML code for new line. So that when we create the HTML email, it's anytime that it sees character 10, it's going to change it with BR, which is the code, again, in HTML for the. So when we create the email, right, all we need to do is enter the message before here, and automatically any new BRs or any new breaks are going to be automatically in there. So once again, this is really important. A lot of you have asked me about the solution. You say, hey, when we create these HTML emails, everything's on the same line. I've had people ask me that before. How do I get it just like if I've created, look, in this one I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code, 4 different carriage returns. How do I carry that over when I create my email? And I want to know how do I create 4 different lines here? So using that replace takes care of that. So that is the solution I wanted to create. I have not seen that solution before, so I really want to emphasize that because that I haven't found online. I just kind of figured that out. So use the replace character 10 with BR, and that is perfect for HTML emails. Okay, moving on, we have our picture file name. We need to create a picture, and we need to set this picture in a location. So we've done that for. We're going to use the current workbook path because we don't have to define any other path, and we're going to just create a picture, and we're going to create this file name. All we're doing is creating a text, a full text that includes this. And we're going to say if this picture already exists, delete it. Because this is just a temporary picture that we're using for the email, so if it exists, I want it to delete it. I want to delete it. So that if it doesn't exist, it would create an error. So that's why we have that's why we've wrapped it in on error, resume next, and on error go to 0. And again, the same thing here. Picture range. Okay, we're taking that range. Remember, that is the range that we set right up here. C2. So we're going to take this range in our Excel, that is this range right here, starting at C2, right, and all the way from L in the last row. We're going to take that range. That's what we're working with now. So when we say picture range, we're going to create a picture from that range. That is going to capture everything, including the graphs. So that's really important. We need that picture. We're going to capture that range, and we're going to create a bitmap from it. So we're creating that bitmap. And next thing we do, I need to place that bitmap, that picture, in the chart object. So we need to create an object, create a chart object. We can, with this line, with the access sheet, chart object, add. Then we say, okay, what is the left? We're going to say the left is the picture range, the top is the picture range. We need to set the width of that and the height exactly as our range. So what we're doing is we're creating a picture, and now we've created the chart. Now what we're going to do is we need to set the size. We're going to use the placement. Where is it placed? And what is the size? The width and height exactly the same as our range. We're going to assign a specific name for this, payroll pick, so we can delete it later, and we're going to activate it. And now I need to figure out what is the width and height of this picture, because I need this when I place it in my email. I need to set the exact height and the exact width. So I need to define the picture width and the picture height so we can do that. So remember, now our width and our height are being held in these variables. That's very important. We don't need this line of code. So that is all we're doing with this here. Next up, we can paste our picture. Now we have the picture. We can paste it in our chart. We can paste the actual picture. We've set our chart at the exact right size here. We've placed it in the exact right place, and now we're going to paste it. We're going to paste that picture in there. And now what we do is, now once it's pasted, now we can export it. I need to export it because I need the email to pull it. I need the email to pull it. So we need to export that. Where are we exporting it? This workbook path and the file name. Okay, I guess we could have used picture file name here. I'll probably change that, but it's the same thing. I can use export picture file name, and now we're going to say, now once we've done that, we don't need that picture anymore inside our Excel, so we can delete it. Once it's exported, we're done with it. We don't need to delete it, so we delete it from our sheet there so that it doesn't appear. Otherwise, we'd have too many pictures. Now we're ready. We've created the picture, and we've put the picture in this location right here. Now we're ready for Outlook. Now we're ready for email. So we're going to create our Outlook application. We're going to create our email. And now we're going to say, with the email, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to send it to the person we email it. And then we're going to attach. Now this is a kind of a trick. Now to get this picture in the email, to get this picture inside the body of the email, I need to create an attachment. But these variables, 1 and 0, these hide the attachment. You'll see when we created it, there is no attachment, right? There's no attachment here, but it's hidden, right? So we've hidden the attachment. It's there, and so that allows us to place it right here because we can pull that attachment and put it right here. So it's kind of a little trick to put a picture inside the body by using the attachment and then hiding the attachment. So that's just what we have done. So we've put the attachment, and in case there's an error, I've also wrapped this on error. The subject is our subject message that have already been replaced with the variables. Now we're going to create an HTML body. We want that HTML body to include the message before, right? Then we're going to insert the pic. We're going to use the source is CID. This is the email. payroll picture JPG. We've defined the name so we know the name. We've attached it. So Outlook knows that we have an attachment. We knows the name, so simply by using CID, the picture, that's going to place it right where we want to. But now we need to know, well, what size should it set at? Remember, we've defined the width as picture width. We've defined the height as the picture height. We know the width and we know the height. So that's going to tell us what the width and the height of that is. And now we're going to put in, now we're going to have a new break, a new line, and then we're going to display the message after. And then we're just going to, that's it. That is it. That's all we have to do. And then we want to display it. Remember, when you want to send those emails, you don't want to display them, get rid of this, right? And just click .send. That will send. That will send. We can do that like that, right? And that will send the emails and not display them. So you may want to do that. When you don't want them displayed, you just want them sent. So use .send and not .display. However, for our purposes, we want them displayed in this training. We can set email to nothing. That's probably a good idea. So that's it. That's all we have to do. And that is exactly what we've done here. So when we create an email and click, and I've assigned this, right click, assign macro, right? Send payroll email. So I've assigned that macro to that button. We have one more macro. So when we click that, the email gets created. Very simple. And now we have one more macro to show you, and that is the send all payrolls. And in this macro, what I want to happen is I want it to go through every single one of these employees, and I want it to generate a payroll for all of them. So by clicking this send all payrolls, it's going to generate, it's going to go through every single employee. We have 6 of them so far. It's going to use the dates that we based it on, and it's going to send all of the payrolls, or it's going to create emails in our cases, for all of the payrolls of all of our employees simply with one macro. And it's just running through that right now. It's going through all 6, and it's done. All 6 employees are done. And you can see, let's go ahead and you can see, here we go. You can see all six emails are created right here. So we have all of those created very simply, and all it does, and each one of them, you see each one of them has different information. Each one of them has their name. Each one of them has different payroll information. Each one of them has a different email, and so they're all dynamic based on the data in the table at the time of creating. So it's extremely powerful in an application. So it's really, really powerful. I wanted to show you that as well. So, and to do that, let's go into the VBA, and it's just a small macro right here. And all we're going to do is we're going to determine the last row of the employees on the employee sheet. Then we're going to start at row 3 and go to the last employee. Again, all we're doing here in the employees, we're starting at row 3 and we're going to the last employee, and we're going to run through each one of those until we get to the end. And then for that, we're going to say, okay, E3 is the employee name. We're going to make E3 the employee name. We're going to calculate the data, right? We want to make sure all the formulas are calculated with that new employee. And then we're going to run the payroll. And then we're going to and then all this does is it activates Excel and make sure that Excel is activated. We want to make sure that the emails are not activated. We want to make sure that Excel maintains focus so that it can run through all of the sheets. So it's going to loop through all of these. And that is how we create multiple emails simply. And that's how we create HTML emails, also along with a powerful payroll application that you can use to create multiple payrolls. And you may want to add and update this as you like. I hope you have enjoyed this extended training. Thank you so much for joining me. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and select on the notifications so that you can get immediate notifications of new videos, and make sure you also download each one of the sample workbooks so you can play with it, customize it, and make it your own for a very, very powerful application. Thanks again. Please share this video and have a great day.